Hello and welcome to the Digital Publishing Podcast, episode 13, Read More. In this episode, Simon and I are joined by Wendy Reid, formerly of Kobo and now working on accessibility at eBay, to discuss her amazing decade in digital publishing. And we're back from our extended summer holiday. Wasn't meant to be that long. Hello, everybody. I'm Simon Mellins, and welcome to the Digital Publishing Podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined once again by my fabulous co-host, Simon Holt. Simon, how was your summer?
My summer was really good. I wish it had lasted a bit longer, but one thing I'm delighted to be is back sitting alongside you and speaking with our fabulous guest on this here podcast.
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, it's great to have you back. And gosh, this season we have a pretty, I don't know if we're doing seasons. Do we call podcasts seasons? We're not serial, but we've got a pretty amazing set of guests. We've got a kind of diverse cast of people in digital publishing lined up for you over the coming months as the weather darkens. But I'm thrilled to kick off this series of podcasts with Wendy Reid, who you may know from her long stint at Kobo, but is now at eBay. We're going to talk all about her amazing career and everything she's up to. Wendy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this. I guess for you, this will be the morning. Wendy's joining us over from Ontario.
Yes, yeah, it's 10 a.m. where I am.
Well, thank you for having your morning coffee with us.
I moved on to water, but coffee.
Oh, yeah.
I could go for another coffee, actually.
I was going to say, already moving on to water at 10 a.m. is good discipline. That's just coffee number 2. So we've got a few questions that we wanted to ask you today, Wendy, but I thought before we go into that, for those people out there who might not know who you are, and I can't imagine how that's possible if you're in this industry, but perhaps you could just introduce yourself and a little top liner about what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Wendy Reid. I spent most of the last decade or more working for Kobo, which is a e-reading platform based in Canada. I had many roles while I was there, all of them related to digital publishing, but most recently working in digital accessibility. I'm now at eBay, where I am also working in accessibility on their team there. And in addition to my day job, I also chair the Publishing Maintenance Working Group at the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, where we maintain EPUB, we work on standards like audiobooks, and hopefully keep pushing forward on digital publishing standards.
Amazing.
Brilliant. And so just sort of to flesh out that intro a little bit more, it would be great just to hear a bit more about your story and how you got involved with digital publishing and maybe digital accessibility a little bit more specifically.
Yeah, of course. I think the story's a bit funny and it's a bit convoluted. I got into this from kind of the typical English major background. I went to university,
Yes.
I studied English literature, and I knew probably by about my second or third year that I wanted to work in publishing. I was serving at my university's one of our publications, even at the time, on the editorial board. But I was hell-bent and determined to not work in digital publishing. I wanted to work in traditional. I wanted to work on the production side. I loved the art of books and like the feel and the beauty, I think, of like a well-published book. But of course, I finished university. I went to publishing school and had a great time. But I also had student loans to pay and needed a job. And the first job that came up was a position with Kobo, and Kobo paid, which was really unusual for publishing
Imagine that.
internships.
Yeah.
Publishing internships in Toronto in 2013 they were paying good money. And so I was like, you know what, like I'll give this a try. At the very least it'll get my foot in the door. And then I spent 12 years there.
I mean, that is just remarkable, really, to think that it came from almost by chance like that. I mean, so many in the industry have known you as Wendy from Kobo over the years. What's that been like? You know, how's it been to be that kind of renowned, and how's it felt transitioning away from that identity?
It's still feels incredibly weird to think that anyone knows who I am at all. But yeah, I think part of it happened just because I fell in love with the product. I think I realized, my initial impressions of digital publishing were wrong, that it was really cool technology, that it really opened doors for people to kind of fall back in love with reading. I was really
I love that.
inspired in my early days of hearing about people who were like, oh, like I stopped reading print because, my eyesight was getting worse, or, I couldn't hold a book anymore, like it was too heavy. And like this device changed my life, or being able to read on my iPad or my iPhone. And I loved that. That was like, it just felt so inspiring to me. And then to be able to kind of work in that world and help build those technologies. And of course, like once I started getting into the standards again, I was actually I felt like I had gotten away from publishing a bit midway through my time at Kobo, because I had moved on to the tech team and I was working out as a quality assurance analyst, and I wasn't dealing with publishers anymore. And I was like, oh, like, do I still count as like a publishing person, or am I a tech person now? And then when I got back into standards, I was like, oh, I'm back. I really love standards, and it was really fun to be able. I mean, it still is. I'm still doing standards, but it felt cool to be able to, build not just like the technology that users see, but also the underlying technologies that kind of prop up the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just listening to you in terms of what you said there about kind of people falling back in love with reading. So I'm a severely sight impaired person myself, as some listeners may or may not know. And I remember being in publishing school myself and hearing about this thing called the e-reader, right? And I think maybe Sony were one of the first people to bring something out, and thinking, wow, this could mean that I could get access to loads of books that I'd never been able to before. It was really exciting. And so I'd be really interested on your reflections, maybe kind of 2 decades after the start of the kind of e-reader phenomenon, whether you think that e-reader as a tool has had the impact that you thought it would, or whether anything about the kind of e-reader's journey, whether we're talking about particular types of e-reader like Kobo or Sony's or Kindle, etc., have surprised you in terms of the direction that the kind of the product has taken, if you like, whether for visually impaired people or everybody else.
Yeah, so my first e-reader was also a Sony. I had the Sony, I think it was the PRS 550.
PRS.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad got it for me while I was in university, thinking that I'd be able to put my school books on it. Which I think actually inspired my initial kind of distaste, because I couldn't use it for school because, the professor gets up and says, oh, go to page 55. And I'm like, where's page 55?
Yeah.
But it had a stylus. You could write on the screen. It was way ahead of its time, which I think is probably true of the Sony story in general. But yeah, like looking back on that, and like when I started at Kobo, obviously Kobo was like established a couple years in. A lot of people had devices, and Kindle was huge, and I think, but it still felt very niche. E-reading was niche on its own, and then it tended to skew towards older populations. It wasn't something for millennials or like Gen Z. And there was definitely a time, like I think probably a couple years in, where there was maybe a fear about the future of e-reading. We started doing tablets, and I kind of think in a hope that like, oh, maybe we just, because people were like, oh, I don't like the black and white, I want color. It's like, okay, we'll do tablets. And then that didn't really work. And then there was kind of like a couple of years where it's like, no, we'll just like, I think there was like news reports about, the e-reader market or the ebooks market even kind of stagnating.
Yeah,
People
I
were
remember
kind of
that.
nervous. And then like, this feels kind of, I still have complicated feelings about saying this, but like the pandemic happened, and e-reading suddenly, I think, became an outlet for so many people.
Hmm.
And it was really to the benefit of the industry because suddenly, like, you're home, you can't go to the bookstore. You want to read, you want that escape. And so we, like, Kobo saw a huge increase in users, a huge increase in sales, which, like, is a good business story, but obviously with the background of, like, a horrible thing happening. But to know that we were kind of providing that escape felt really good. I definitely read a lot in lockdown.
Yeah.
And I think it only actually ended up building from there because I think over the last couple of years, as we've transitioned out of that, color e-readers have become a thing. So now that kind of complaint about color is diminishing. People are embracing, I think, I don't want to say like a lower tech lifestyle because e-readers are still tech, but a low distraction, like lower distractions, more focus, and like e-readers really, really play into that. Like our e-readers, you can't get text messages on them.
Right. Right.
You can't get distracted by like Twitter when you're using an e-reader. And then of course like the accessibility story, it distraction plays part in it, being able to adjust it to your
Yeah.
to your needs and your preferences, things like text to speech. All of these features have kind of come up in the last couple of years, and it's made, I think, e-reading both on like e-ink tablets, which I think have gotten kind of popular again, and there's like more products now that have e-ink as like the idea of using black and white as like a better alternative to color. There's like a bunch of strange products that have come out over the last couple of years, but that e-reading in general, I think, has kind of gotten a life of its own, also just like as a way to improve yourself and also, maybe help the environment or help your focus and things like that. So like it's been kind of crazy over the last like 12 years to see like the rise, I don't want to say fall, the dip, the leveling off, and then kind of this new era that we're in right now.
And it makes me think of what you said earlier about when you started your career, how you were maybe resistant to the digital side of things, and as I think many of us once were, kind of pure about wanting to be in books. Do you think that attitude more broadly is shifting over time? I've talked on this podcast before about how for a lot of us working in ebooks, in digital publishing, when you tell someone that's what you do for a living, you have to listen to a mini lecture about the smell of paper. Do you get the impression that is shifting, or perhaps is it like with the shift back to vinyl records?
I think it kind of goes both ways because I definitely still see, the book talk phenomenon of people being quite obsessed with, the physical book, with, curating the perfect bookshelf, with the kind of the aesthetics of print still. But, there's now book talkers that do read digital and do talk about their digital libraries and things like that. So like that is, I think we're shifting. People are also realizing too that, digital is great for, you don't need to store all those books in your house. You can lend from the library and support your local libraries without having to have physical books. You can do it all digitally now. It is tricky because people do have a lot of, I think, nostalgia and like affection towards the print book. Like I certainly do. My thing now is like I read basically exclusively digitally. And if there's a book I really love, I will buy a print copy of it.
Yeah, the same.
And it's because it's almost a vetting process of like, okay, no, but I really love this one, so I'm going to own the physical copy of it. And I think I'm hoping more people do this too, because I think it is important for like sustainability. Printing all these books all the time is not great for the environment, shipping them in across the oceans. Like the supply chain is a huge problem. I think we can like do a lot more with digital. I will say like, it's interesting from the Kobo perspective because I got to witness, I think, the traditional publishing industry's take on digital and the self-published industry's take on digital, and they are so divergent. I think the struggle I've seen working in standards and working in industry is that traditional publishers are still very resistant to digital as the future, as I think a viable business. And a viable like thing that they could be if they would invest in it and if they would work on making that experience like special. They'd probably see gains, but they're just not doing it. Whereas like self-published authors and small publishing houses, like very small ones, they're running with it. They're experimenting. They're trying new things. And I think that's why we're seeing the success on that side, where like publishers, I think traditionally are leaning on the prestige. And they're not innovating as quickly as I think they should be.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point here, which makes me wonder whether, in your experience, you find that some of the bigger players are less open to technologies or trends that disrupts the status quo, right? So, one thing I think we've all seen is consolidation in the market, but also fragmentation in terms of startups and technologies and what have you. And certainly thinking about your time at Kobo, you obviously were a competitor to a couple of massive worldwide global brands, right? Sony and, in the e-reader space, even more so Amazon. And I kind of wonder what you can tell us, if anything, about, any interactions you had with the publishing industry, either supportive or not so much, in terms of the kind of, innovative new things that you guys wanted to do compared to some of these, giant behemoths, that were kind of real sort of global heavyweights.
Yeah, it was a big challenge, and I think like especially the early days when we were really small, we maybe almost put too much emphasis on it. And there was kind of the David versus Goliath story. There was oh, like, look at us, this scrappy little company. I mean, we're still small, or Kobo's still small, still scrappy. But I think the thing that Kobo differentiated on, which is why I loved it so much and continue to love it, is that we focused on the reader. And we took bets on, like, okay, we're not gonna do what some of our competitors have done. Like, there was kind of the running joke, like, our who are your competitors? Oh, just the 3 largest tech companies in the world. But like, we were also the only one just doing books, right? Like, Apple has all of Apple. Google has the search engine and the docs and all of these various products. Amazon, Kindle is fairly consolidated, but at the same time, like, it's part of this much larger ecosystem of products and services. And we could just say, like, we had the ability to be like, well, all we care about is books. All we care about is readers. We're not trying to sell you a toaster at the same time as a book. And I mean, there still is challenges, like, especially with the size of Amazon, like, you sometimes you go to a publisher and they're like, yeah, but like Kindle isn't doing it, or like Kindle doesn't want that. There was challenge for a while too, like until the last couple of years, where Kindle wasn't using EPUB. And so trying to really push the advancement of EPUB when people are like, yeah, but I still have to make Mobi for Amazon.
Yeah.
And with that changing, that's actually been like a huge, I think, bump to EPUB 3, because now it's like, no excuse, just make EPUB 3 files. But at the same time, like, there's still some features that I think I would definitely love to see. Maybe like a lot more creativity with the format, or with different formats that we just don't see, because they're like, why would, like, you make up, X% of our sales, this company does, Y%, and that Y is way bigger. Why are we going to invest? It's a challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's always felt to me that Kobo was sort of team standards in that way, that even down to the fact that I remember you could sideload EPUBs in when not every app allowed you to do that. EPUB felt like it was acknowledged and part of the world with Kobo, where Amazon almost started beginning to feel like they didn't want it to exist. Was this always a very kind of conscious thing, that standards were were very important at Kobo?
Yeah, I think partly standards, but also partly flexibility. We really wanted to be the platform that let you read the way you wanted. We were going to be like we're like for readers through and through. And so if that meant that you were the type of person that sideloaded your books from Project Gutenberg,
Mhm.
or if you were the type of person that, got your books from the library, and that meant that you had to sideload to our devices. Like, okay, yeah, sure. I mean, part of it was that like it still means you bought a device, like from a business
Yeah.
perspective. But at the same time, like, it just means that you get to use the device the way you want to, and we're not going to stop you if you want to do more with it. Like technically our devices support more than EPUB. They do support Mobi. You can open a Mobi on a Kobo device. You can open PDF. You can open PNG files, like if you want to,
Hmm.
doc files. EPUB is obviously like our preferred format. We're definitely geared towards that, but we want you to be able to read however you feel comfortable reading.
Absolutely. And just kind of staying on that theme of standards, I used the word fragmented before, right? And I think the publishing industry is becoming more fragmented in lots of ways. Um, so, could you tell us about the place of standards in a fragmented industry like ours? And do you think that place has shifted in the past decade or so? I suppose I'm thinking a bit about um, things like, file format, um, enhancements. I'm thinking about obviously accessibility legislation, which is where Simon and I work. I'm thinking about things like CPLD. Um, I'd be really interested to think about content and other type standards in publishing, and yeah, where you think that sits and how it's changed.
Yeah. I would say with standards, the focus has always been, and I think it's my philosophy about standards and publishing in particular, is that it's better for everyone if we have a shared standard for the structure and the transport and the loading of files, but that those standards should also be designed in such a way to give content creators the most flexibility that we can possibly give them in terms of what types of content they want to create. If, do you want to use HTML, or do you want to use different image formats or videos, or maybe JavaScript? Like that's been a big challenge, if anything. But how do we design standards in a way that the structure, the like kind of frame around the content, the box it comes in is predictable and consistent and easy for various technologies to use, but you still have freedom to do what you want with the content. That's been like I think the ethos that we've been following, especially in the last couple of years. The true challenge to that has been like digital publishing is so diverse, but also so is publishing. Like publishing as an industry is it, if it is wildly diverse in the types of content that get produced, but then also the expectations that come with the different types of content. Just as an example, like a lot of the calls that we've been having recently within the W3C space have been actually talking about digital comic formats coming out of like Korea and Japan, because they over the last couple of years we've seen a huge rise in a content type called webtoons, which is a vertically scrolled comic. It's still read kind of in a panel by panel fashion, but the boundaries of those panels are much looser. It's really designed to fit on a phone screen and be read on those smaller devices, but it completely flies in the face of like how we build comics for fixed layout EPUB, how reading systems work in a lot of cases. And so, we have to really think about, oh, like, okay, this is a whole new format. How do we make this work? How do we make it possible to do this in EPUB? Because one of the things we want is like accessibility. Right now, it's not a very accessible format, and we don't want an entire population of people cut out of enjoying some really cool stories. Like I'm a huge webtoons fan. They're really cool. But right now it's like a lot of the apps, it's just images in a scroll, and you don't get that full experience. Um, and that's just like one example. Like we have education, but then like, okay, we have K to 12 versus higher ed. You've got journals, you've got professional, like corporate publishing, um, trade, but then trade even has like segments within it. Like, how do we make a format that works for all of those different people and all of their different use cases?
And these are fantastic examples. I think it's a good moment to switch and talk a bit about standards and those kind of groups. Um, I don't know if everybody listening knows about this, but I mean, so many of the standards, like EPUB and its kind of related substandards, uh, so much of the conversation that leads to these coming about and changing is from these long, regular video calls or web calls that so many people donate their time to around the world to kind of progress these standards. And I mean, Wendy, I obviously I see you a lot on these calls. Could you just talk a bit about how you became involved and indeed how you ended up chairing in some instances as well?
Yeah, the story is in many ways kind of a funny one in that it happened. I got started getting involved right when I was kind of convinced that I was no longer a publishing person. I was working as a QA analyst. I think I was on the iOS team at the time, and I was deep in that like tech world. But I just like, I was testing books, but I wasn't spending time with publishers.
Right.
I wasn't talking to them anymore. And so I was like, oh, like maybe I'm a tech person now. Like maybe my career has completely changed. And then my old manager at Kobo, Ben Dugas, who some people might remember,
Yeah.
he was still working on the content team, and he came to me and was like, hey, I've been invited to join this working group. It was then called the Publishing Working Group. I think you might be interested in this. Like you're like, I had kind of built up a really good knowledge base on EPUB. I'd kind of become a bit of an internal expert about it. And he's like, yeah, like I think your insight with like working on the apps teams and the e-reader team will, be helpful here. And so I was like, yeah, like that sounds cool. I'll join a call. And I did, and I was like, oh, like this is really, really interesting stuff. So I joined, every week. And then I think I'll never remember the timeline. This was around 2017. In 2018, the publishing working group needed another chair. And they reached out and they're like, Wendy, you've been on a lot of calls. You seem like the type of person that might want to do this. Do you want to do it? And I said, sure. Having zero idea of what I was getting myself into. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I chaired that group. We published the audiobook spec. We published publication manifest. As that was wrapping up, the EPUB 3.2 revision had been done, and we were like, let's take EPUB over the line at W3C, and let's do EPUB 3.3. So we embarked immediately on that, and now we're working on like the next iteration of EPUB, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to have gone from kind of just being suggested to try it out to being so central to so many of those calls. Again, I think it's a kind of it's one of those underappreciated things that everyone benefits from, but it really comes down to largely just volunteers giving huge amounts of their time, on calls and going through GitHub repos to kind of keep all of this going. How do you feel the standards, the calls and that side of things is going at this kind of moment in EPUB's life?
It's an interesting time. I'll say that. I think one of the challenges right now that we're facing is that everyone is using the standards. EPUB is well adopted to the point now where I think people want more, and understandably so. Like technology has obviously evolved at a rapid pace. The entire time we've been working on digital publishing, and people want more from their books. They want more from their reading experiences. And we have to do things within the standards to kind of make some of that happen. especially in like an interoperable way. One of the projects we're working on right now is annotations, because right now there just really isn't a great way to move annotations around, book to book, platform to platform. But the
Yes.
challenge right now with that is that, especially those big publishing players, like the big publishing companies, ebooks make up probably less than 10% of their overall sales. And so they don't see the incentive to participate in standards the way that they really should be, the way that we need them to give that perspective. We rely a lot
Right.
on small independent people to participate in our work, which is great. They bring super valuable perspectives, but they also like they don't have the perspective of a large publishing company. So,
Right.
they're bringing a different perspective. We also need more participation from reading systems, but kind of the same problem I mentioned earlier, where like most of the large reading systems, especially in like kind of the North American, European context, they're, just a small part of a much larger corporation. And so even they are like, oh, like this publishing thing is kind of like this books thing is kind of an add-on, right? It's not their top priority.
Yeah.
And so getting kind of the investment that we need both in people and time is a bit of a challenge right now, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I sort of an interview on this podcast, or indeed any other publishing podcast, wouldn't be complete if we didn't mention the dreaded words AI at least once. So, how do you see the ebook and e-reader and reading platform space evolving? In the light of AI, and now AI is in the picture. You talked about people, and obviously it's always going to be about people, and slash but this technology is clearly quite transformative as well. So I'd be interested to hear what role you think it will play and what some of the opportunities and limitations might be.
Ooh, AI. It's so I have so many difficult thoughts about AI because there are, I think, some huge benefits that it presents, like this huge leap forward in terms of technologies, like improvements to things like TTS. TTS used to be kind of derided as very robotic, very unpleasant to listen to, and now we have obviously much more natural sounding voices that can be it becomes a bit more pleasurable to listen to them, possibly to the point where the problem now, of course, is possibly to the point where it encroaches on the work of human voice actors, which
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I have I have really mixed feelings about, because I think it's really important for more and more content to be available both in text and audio for accessibility reasons. But I also acknowledge that human narrators are amazing and deserve to kind of have a role in this and to be able to prosper and have their careers, because I've always enjoyed a human narrated audiobook far more than a computer one. But at the same time, like there's a lot of books that would never be made in audio. And these tools can actually help us get audio versions of books that like the physics textbook for your first year university class that no human is ever going to narrate. That's like, I think, the power of AI. There's like some really cool features with things like translation, with things like summarization, maybe like being able to catch up in a series, stuff like that, where I think, AI can like play a role. Where I get nervous and where I get queasy is seeing publishers and other companies, not just publishers, use AI to reduce the workforce, or to take, to think that they're taking job, like to use it in replacement of human workers. Oh, do we can we use AI to look at the slush pile? Can we use AI to like speed up marketing efforts? I already see it happening in publishing. I see it happening in all industries. Oh, do we really need to pay someone to make this video when I can just ask Google Gemini to do it, or whatever? I feel really queasy about that, because I think we need people, we need humans to do this work. There's definitely ways to like make some work easier, especially like, kind of maybe the unpleasant parts of any of our jobs. But it is tricky because you want to balance things out. I think there's like so many good features, but it's balanced out by so many features that could be abused or misused. And like, I won't even touch on like the whole copyright situation, because it leaks into standards as well, where people are asking us like, how can we protect content? And I'm like, I don't know if we can.
Right.
It's, we can write as many standards as we want. It's kind of like DRM. You can put as much DRM on something as you want. If someone is determined enough, they will get it anyway.
Yeah, as has always been the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, I'm conscious that, of course, we're talking so much. We talked all about Kobo and about ebooks and e-reading, but really the vine you used to swing from Kobo into your new career at eBay was accessibility. I'd love to know how that became so much a part of your role at Kobo that you've now chosen to make that the kind of the core of your career progression.
It kind of happened because of standards, believe it or not. As I was working in standards and getting, exposure to different people, I'll name drop because I think they deserve all the credit. People like the folks from Daisy, so like Avnish Singh, George Kirscher, all of the folks there, really opened my eyes to a problem that I'll be honest, I thought was solved. I thought, with the way technology had moved, with the iPhones and Android and all these amazing technologies that we had at our disposal, that digital accessibility was a solved problem, that it was, everything's available digitally. So surely, people of different abilities can access everything. And, to learn that, first off, no, that's not the case. And also, like, most products out there are built in ways that actively, bar people from being able to access them. Like EPUB as a format is massively accessible. Most reading applications are not. And so to hear that, and also then to hear like, well, Kobo's not great. I was like, well, I can, my initial thought was like, oh, I can fix that. I'm on those teams. I was working on the iOS team at the time, and had worked on the e-reader team and the Android team. And I was like, well, we can fix this, surely. Yeah. And so, I went back and I was like, oh, they're like, when I started talking to people about it, they're like, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. How do we do it? And I was like, oh, like, I'm a problem solver. I love a good problem. And so I was like, yeah, I'll just do some research. I'll do some research. I'll figure it out. And at the time I was working in like what was called a QA strategy. So I was planning testing, and I was like looking at projects, like testing projects. And so I asked my boss at the time, I was like, hey, can I just like spend like 10% of my time on this accessibility thing? Like, I just want to get more educated. Maybe, we can figure out what we need to do to like make our products more accessible. And to his credit, he was like, yeah, sure. Go for it. In less than a year, I went from 10% to 100%.
This is a familiar story with a lot of us who work in this space.
Oh, yes. And then suddenly it became my full-time role, and I was looking at vendors, and we were getting our products assessed, and working with different organizations, like in Canada, like a National Network of Equitable Library Services and Center for Equitable Library Access, and all those amazing people, and just learning as much as I could and working with our teams to like try and kind of nudge things as much as I possibly could. I got really lucky as well because this was around 2019. I found out that Ontario, the province that I live in, was about to hit a deadline for a law called the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act that had a big a deadline coming up in 2020 for digital products in the province. They had to be WCAG 2.0 AA compliant. And I was like, well, we're not there. We got to do this. And, was able to get over the finish line, at least on the website, because it was only for web.
Right.
And then, but also working to kind of change the hearts and minds of people within the company, which I was able, I think, to do. And over the last couple of years, we've worked really hard on EAA.
Yeah, which was also published in 2019, right?
Yes,
So you had
2019 was
the
a
same.
great year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I spent a lot of time like not only educating myself, but then trying to work with others to educate within the organization, and learning from, people in standards, people in the accessibility industry. And I really fell in love with, it was kind of the perfect blend of technical and problem solving and doing a job that I knew that everything I did had a material impact on someone's life. And that felt really, really good. And then I kind of ironically, or not ironically is not the right word. In 2021, I have no problem talking about this. I got diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive type. I was 30 years old, and I had always wondered, why my brain operated the way it did. And of course, being exposed to so many people in the disability community, you start putting the dots together, and you're like, wait, you mean this isn't normal, or this isn't the average experience? And so the diagnosis came after working in accessibility, but it meant that when it happened, I was like, oh, not only are there people like me out there, there are tools and there are things that are available to me, and a whole community of amazing people that just want the best. And I get to work and help and make that a little bit better as well.
Amazing.
And so, final question, as I feel like we've probably grilled you within an inch of your life. Obviously, you're now starting out in a new industry, and therefore, looking back on some of your experiences in the publishing industry, I wondered what the main thing you learned was, and if you've got any advice for people just starting out in publishing accessibility or digital publishing more generally today.
So I shouldn't say run.
No, we need them here.
No, we need you. We need, possibly now more than ever, we need people in the arts. We need people who care about others. Like, I think accessibility is a caring profession. You have to be so empathetic, and you have to care so much about other people. And I think that's incredibly important in the kind of climate we're currently in. I think publishing is like, it's always been a kind of a pivotal industry in the shaping of the discourse and people's access to information. And so like, it's important. It's incredibly important to be in publishing. And if you want to make that move, do it. And if you feel passionately about publishing or accessibility or both, like, there are people out there who you should get in touch with, like Simon and Simon, and you should. It's a good job. The challenging part, and like, I think it's really important to be like really honest about what it's like to work in the publishing industry in particular. It's gotten a lot better over like many years. Like, when I started out as an intern, like, I got the one paid internship. That has completely changed. They're now pretty much all paid, which is really amazing to see. Mm-hmm. But like, there's still huge strides to be made in terms of like, pay equity and advancement and things like that. But go in clear-eyed. I like to tell people. Also, don't be afraid to like pivot. Working in publishing, I know a lot of people that have made the move to working in tech or working in marketing or associated industries, copywriting, things like that. Your publishing skills are not too niche that you can't apply them anywhere else. I think an English degree is massively underrated in terms of the type of person you enter the workforce as in terms of skills. Most English majors are amazing critical thinkers. They're good communicators, and those are the types of kind of soft skills that can really help you in a career.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah. It's not all darkness and gloom out there. But Yeah, it'll be interesting moving. I mean, it's in some ways it's a new industry. In many ways, for me, it's kind of an extension of what I was already doing because I
Right.
was working in, at the end of the day, Kobo is a bookstore and it's digital e-commerce, and I'm just moving to like a full-time e-commerce company.
Right.
I am learning a lot of really interesting things about, trading cards and coin collecting and vintage like record collecting and stuff like that. That is like a big part of
Cool.
what eBay does, and it's every day. It's really cool what people sell and buy and do with their collections. It's really fun.
And just so everybody knows about this, do you want to tell us what your role is at eBay? What you're there helping with?
Yeah, I am a product manager, which is an interesting change for me because I've never thought of myself as a product manager, but that's what I am now on the accessibility team. So we're a fairly small team, but we get to work with our various developer teams, open source. I actually get to do some open source work now that I'm really excited by.
Amazing.
But we work with the product teams, the design teams, the development teams at eBay to kind of push ahead on, improving the accessibility in their workflows. Our team produces tools for anyone who uses Figma. We have an amazing tool called Include, which helps you make your annotate your Figma designs with more like accessibility information and things like that for your developers, which is super useful and very handy.
Very cool.
We also have we do a lot of work with like producing open source documentation and resources. We have the playbook, which is just like all our different components and things like that. And it's been really fun to kind of be able to do this work, but then also contribute back to the community and help everyone be a little bit more accessible on the web.
That's fantastic. And finally, to close off, Wendy, you were saying to me before the show that you're hoping to planning to continue in your kind of standards work. So you can tell us a bit about that and how people can find you and get in touch.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be continuing in standards. I will be still chairing Publishing Maintenance Working Group for at least a while longer. Still working on fixed layout accessibility. I'm also a member of Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, so working on WCAG and the next iteration of that, so you'll see me there. I'm also going to be doing some work with Accessibility Standards Canada probably soon with AI and authoring tools, which will be cool, and we'll get that standard updated maybe, fingers crossed. And trying to think what else I'm doing. If you want to reach me, LinkedIn, though I'm really slow to reply to messages, so apologies for that, anyone who has ever messaged me on LinkedIn. Or I'm on Blue Sky under Read More online.
Hey.
REID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it might be. Very good.
Yeah. And I use that handle many places, so that's the usual spot. Or you can just email me, Wendy Reid at fastmail.com. I'm happy to chat with anyone who loves accessibility or loves publishing or both.
Fantastic. Wendy, thank you again so much for giving us your time this morning and for sharing your experiences and your amazing time at Kobo. And best of luck with everything over at eBay.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. This was really fun.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much. And with that, we bring this episode to a close. We'll be back very soon, I promise. It won't be another long summer holiday. And in the meanwhile, thank you so much for tuning in to the Digital Publishing Podcast.